Here on TVC Breakfast, is now time for us to look at what the papers are reporting. And the Nation newspaper has, with the banner headline, 2024-2025 budget, Tinubu seeks nod to spend for the 3.56 trillion naira. Lawmakers okay presentation of 2026 appropriation bill tomorrow. Next is the Daily Trust, tax laws altered, talking about section 64, subsection 1. The Guardian newspaper also speaks to tax reforms, pushback, revenue crisis threaten 2026 fiscal plan. Vanguard newspaper, Dangote quake, Farouk falls. Next is the Punch newspaper, petrol war fallouts, NMDPRA, NUPRC bosses resign as Dangote's petition rocks sector. Next newspaper is This Nigeria, how Farouk was forced to resign as MD of NMDPRA. NUPRC's boss, Komolafe, quits too. Tinubu names successor, seeks Senate's approval. Next is the Leadership newspaper. Farouk Ahmed Komolafe resign as downstream, upstream oil regulators chiefs. First Daily, Dangote allegations rock oil sector as Tinubu replaces NMDPRA, NUPRC heads. The Daily Times, reps to repeal Electoral Act 2022, propose new electoral framework. And Platform Times, electronic voting results now compulsory, says reps, 5-year jail term for fraudulent presiding officers. INEC IREF portal must now operate in real time. Over 10 clauses reviewed in landmark sitting. And that's about it for the newspapers. I'll be doing this with Olamide Odekunle and indeed Biodun Shomi, our in-house analyst. Olamide, let me start off with you. The president is expected to present the budget for the 2026 budget, but then we had concern regarding the expenditures for, the full implementation of the older budget. And then he has also asked for the repeal, seeks not to spend for the 3.56 trillion naira for the capital expenditure, expenditure, and debt servicing, statutory transfer. So we'll be looking at another rounds of figures come tomorrow, Friday.
Absolutely. It's good to see that we're planning ahead of time, but unfortunately we find ourselves in sometimes such a volatile economic climate that it's hard to budget appropriately, and it's hard to budget on the dot because prices are constantly changing. Everything is in flux, and so to budget for the average Nigerian who's under economic volatility, it will be very, very difficult. We don't mind a big budget, but let that budget go towards enriching everybody and improving our quality of life. Is what I will say, and those figures will be accounted for by the president because he's very thorough.
Biodun Shomi, what are your expectations, come tomorrow regarding the president's, plan to present the budget for the 2026 fiscal year?
Yeah, I think many Nigerians will be interested in seeing, looking at the capital expenditure. We've never had any problems with recurrent. Yes, at times we do spend more, but there's no year that we do not achieve recurrent expenditure because you have to pay salaries and you have to run government. But importantly, many Nigerians will be looking at the consolidation, how the 2024-2025 budget, capital budget, have been transferred to the new budget and the consolidation of that. Will that lead to the stoppage of abandoned project, which we've always been having year on year out? Will that lead to the duplication, of capital projects? Like what, you remember in the past, you will have, this year you vote so amount of money for a particular item, and the next year you are voting the same money, and even when it's capital. So there's no way you can keep repeating that time and time again. Well, I hope they will sort that out. I hope the steps being taken currently will address all that, and then we can now have one single budget, on a year-on-year basis, rather than budget being implemented halfway and then you transfer it to the following year. So Nigerians will be looking, at that, and particularly the capital projects, to see that at least substantial amount of money will go into capital expenditure.
Just quickly, you asked Mr. Shomi his expectations for, the budget. What I'm noticing in the budget is that it feels as though we're budgeting for survival, not expansion. It seems as though we're prioritizing our debt servicing and the basic essentials. I want to see a budget that focuses on expansion, that takes our growth into account and our possible, our potential revenue.
Yeah, but relatively, to be fair, if you look at the 2025 budget and even the incoming 2026 budget, we've seen an increase in non-oil revenue from our non-oil exports. So therefore, it means increasingly we are reducing our dependency on the oil sector as a main source of financing our national budget. It used to be 80%. I think it's about 60% now, or 62, thereabout. So if we're able to achieve more non-oil exports, which in the coming year, we'll be able to reduce that gap, and that will provide better stability for national development.
All right, then let's move on to the Daily Trust as well as the Guardian newspaper. We're talking about the tax. With the Guardian newspaper saying tax reforms push back, revenue crisis threatening 2026 fiscal plan, and Daily Trust saying tax laws altered. And if you look at section 61, subsection 4, it's saying the tax authority shall have the power to investigate or cause an investigation to be conducted to ascertain any violation of any tax law, whether or not such violation has been reported to the relevant tax authorities. I'm saying it is the white man that designed a pen. You know what I'm trying to say? That also designed the eraser. A whole lot of people will be looking at how do I boycott, not boycott, how do I circumvent, the tax laws. People are already advising, if you want to send money to so and so person, you need to target right. If it's a gift, you need to let it know that it's a gift. If it's you funding your account, you need to target appropriately so that you make it taxable or not taxable. Olamide, very quickly.
Absolutely. What I find interesting about this tax conversation, if I may get historical here for a bit, I feel it's a very, very, unfortunately, very medieval development. When the Queen would tax the citizens and all of that. For this new tax reform bills, I know that low-income earners are going to be exempted, and I know that high-income earners, they can afford it. It's the middle class that are going to really sort of feel the strain. And I've said this time and time again, we don't mind paying our taxes, but we want to see it go to what truly matters, as simple as that. And the fact that I know a House of Reps member came out yesterday, says that some of the figures of what they put on paper and it's not tallying. There should be cohesive, coherent tax reform.
Absolutely.
That's how we should be.
But I think taxation is very, very key, to any development, regardless. If you look at some of the things to look out for, if you look at value-added tax, input credit for businesses to reduce cost, exemption for small businesses, zero rate and exemption on essentials. As Olamide has also said, personal income tax, the poor is exempted, the middle class pays less, and the rich pays marginally more. Residency rules employment income. So I don't know, how are you optimistic about January the 1st, 2026, the takeoff of the tax regime?
I am, because one, it marks a new beginning in terms of talking about progressive taxation, what is fair. People earning below 800,000 a year will not be paying any tax, which is fine. It does not mean they won't get tax exemption certificate. They will get it. It's just that they are not paying anything into the federation account. If they need a tax clearance certificate for any purposes, they will still be able to get it. Yeah. Those who are earning, businesses who are earning, less than 50 million, would heave, a sigh of relief, because they would not be paying any business tax, and therefore it will free more resources for small, medium enterprises to reinvest within the economy and to allow their businesses to survive. Yeah. Basically, when you look at the totality, a friend was telling me, a fellow chartered accountant, told me just about 2 days ago that less than 19%, about 19% of those who are supposed to voluntarily declare their taxes and not doing so, their income, they are not doing so. So therefore, what you find is a huge number of Nigerians are not actually paying taxes. And they're supposed to pay because they earn a lot more than so many other fellow Nigerians.
Because of our time, let's move on to the Daily Times as well as the Platform Times, who are speaking to the Electoral Act, which is being reformed by the National Assembly. The Daily Times says, reps to repeal Electoral Act 2022, propose new electoral framework. And the Platform Times is saying electronic voting results now compulsory, says reps. 5-year jail for fraudulent presiding officer or officers. INEC IRF portal must now operate in real time. Over 70 clauses reviewed in landmark sittings. So 2023, we had lots and lots of issues which we've been analyzing, and then we're looking forward to 2027. Now, the National Assembly is looking to reworking the Electoral Act. But one thing that is quite interesting for me here is the 5-year jail term for fraudulent presiding officers and 10-year jail term for also returning officer or presiding officer who failed to stamp or sign the result sheet?
Wonderful deterrence. I think that's great deterrence, and I think that 2027 is coming up. Nigerians are watching to see, because we have to understand that the change from elections doesn't just come from the voting populace, or doesn't just, it comes from policy. The policy that we set, aside from having a new INEC chairman, the policy that we set, our lawmakers set, is what is going to lay a foundation for 2027 elections. I love that they're saying that it's very pertinent and important and almost compulsory that IREF results must be posted in real time, because I've said this before. IREF is so important because it's where the, voters and the electorate go to see that their vote counts. They want to believe in the process again. They want to believe in that transparency and that hope. And so when people feel that things are shoddy going on, they lose hope in the ballot. I think earlier on this year we saw that the presidency put in place an electoral offences board, and it's good. This is great deterrence. Policy sets the pace for the polity.
Absolutely. They're also looking at single-day elections. Lawmakers are now proposing holding all 5 major elections: presidential, National Assembly, governorship, state assembly, and FCT council on a single day to reduce cost and voter fatigue.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite very expensive to conduct elections. Yeah. So you can imagine after conducting elections, again, people have to come back. You have to employ new people, the same people that repeated the last election. You have to pay for logistics, you know, the duplication of papers and all that, whereas all this can be done in a day. For me, what matters most is, one, it reduces, is not the cost of conducting elections. Two, it also reduces the cost of labor lost to the economy, because it means each time you have to shut down from 6 p.m. on Friday until the next day, 6 p.m. Saturday. That's a huge loss to the economy. So if you're able to manage that and reduce that, while at the same time not compromising on voters' trust, which in any case I think they're trying to address through electronic transmission of results, and for me, I think that's fine.
Yeah, it has to be done real time. And that is the problem, because by the time you're doing it real time, people who are voting in the rural area and not having enough access to quality access to the the network service. How do you think they can do that in real time?
Yeah, voter equity is very, very important, especially in the digital age. People in rural areas, if they don't have the right channels, the right processes, service providers, network, they are going to be removed from the polity. And so how can we say we have a free and fair election if a huge chunk of people have been relegated digitally? That's a worry.
And I know that INEC is also working with the NCC to ensure that they provide adequate network infrastructure to places where, because they can't, gerrymandering will definitely happen, and they can't start saying you can't vote here because of network. You have to go to another ward to conduct elections.
How convenient.
Unfortunately, I don't even think, I have not seen it, I don't think House of Reps would compulsorily say that or remove the right of INEC to use manual transmission of results. The reason is very clear. Look, how many people, can you compel service providers in the telecommunication sector to go and install masts in certain areas? They won't.
When is it economically viable for them?
Absolutely, because theirs is based on business decision. Is it viable? Is not? How many subscribers are in this area? As far as they are concerned, that's the private sector business decision-making process. So NCC on its own cannot even compel them, to do that. So what that simply means is we will be cutting off a huge millions and millions of Nigerians in the rural area, people living in riverine areas and all that. And that will never be acceptable. So I think in that situation, yes, we want electronic transmission of results, but where it becomes impossible, either due to service problem or where those facilities are not available, data transmission facilities are not available, then INEC should be able to
INEC has to take into account every single type of voter. Those in the rural areas, those in the polity, those with phones, those without phones. Every type of voter's vote matters.
That's also why it's good that the House of Reps is saying that, look, the Form ECATA, that's the result sheet, must be signed. So that once it's signed, nobody can alter it or change it, because copies will have to be given to
them. I always learn so much from you. I learned so much from you.
We have to go now.
Thank you.
All right, and that's about it for the newspapers up for review. In our next conversation, we'll look at measures to decongest Apapa ports and the growing impact of heavy-duty vehicles on roads.